About 3,000 of you subscribe, but only about 200 are getting notifications, so click the bell and click all. I've been reading through the Dishonored RPG from Modiphius, who always seem to be very busy lately, and it filled me with a sense of queasy nostalgia. It made me think back to not long after 3rd edition and the rise of the open gaming license and system reference document, when everybody was putting out game systems that they made into universal game systems, when everyone was doing tie-in games and looking for licenses, and there was a lot of churn of material, all using similar systems, and people were trying to tie into film series, TV series. We had the Buffy and Angel RPGs. Mongoose Publishing did this whole thing where they kind of churned through licenses and quickly put out D20 games for it, and it seemed to do all right for them while it was viable. And this kind of felt similar because Modiphius keep trying to squeeze their 2D20 system into everything, and it's a tie-in game, but it's a computer game tie-in game, which we haven't seen a huge amount of compared to other tie-ins in the past. And I've always thought that that is a bit of a mistake, because computer games come with a built-in fan base, a lot of background information, which is useful, and often a lot of concept art, which, if you're wily when you're dealing with the license holder, you can get access to, which means the background to your world is essentially already written and just needs to be rewritten, made more concise, or expanded upon here and there, depending on the terms of the license. You've already got a fan base, you've already got artwork. The vast majority of your work is already done. Where you're going to get stiffed is on the license and whether there's a sufficient crossover audience for it to really work. But I've thought that there's a lot of computer games that could really do with a decent RPG. This is decent. Less so their Fallout game, which doesn't seem to quite know what it is, and a lot of other tie-in games tend to be low quality in the same way that tie-in fiction tends to be low quality, unfortunately. But this is pretty good as far as it goes, and I think other licenses like Assassin's Creed or Horizon Zero Dawn would be good things for people to make games of. Just not convinced you should use your in-house system all the time, because different games and different worlds have different requirements, and different kinds of rules will support those games in different ways. Their system actually works quite well for this, but other things it doesn't necessarily, and I really do think crowbarring in or Frankensteining your system to different genres, different games, different settings just doesn't necessarily work that well. So presentation-wise, it's a very nice book. It's laid out reasonably well. There's a lot of use of that concept art that I was alluding to before. So presentation-wise, everything's there. If you've played Dishonored or Dishonored 2, the world is there, the concept art from the game is there. It's let down a bit by the additional art that's in here. It just doesn't rise to the same standard, so a bit more money for a bit better work there would have been good. I mean, it's not bad, it's just it doesn't live up to the rest of the artwork. That's the problem, if anything. And there's plenty of material in here, background on the world and the islands and so on, though it doesn't really expand on the empty spaces particularly, but then that's probably down to licensing terms, because the people behind the computer game probably want to expand on that themselves, and they don't want anyone else tinkering in their playground. So you're not going to learn anything particularly new out of this. The book is obviously also less expansive than the Dishonored wikis that you'll find online, which contain every minute iota of detail about the world, copies of all the texts and the background material, the artwork and so on. So there's not a great deal to recommend the book as an informational source over online wikis, other than that it's hard copy and it's not going to get deleted anytime soon. Rules-wise, it's their 2D20 system with a few tweaks. It wears its Fate and Apocalypse World influences on its sleeve. It only has a handful of overly broad skills, but if you think of them as general skills that you might get in any other game, like climb, run, yeah, that sort of stuff that anybody can do, that's okay. Styles was a nice approach, so you can be a bold fighter, for example. So you get your basic skills, you get your styles, which describe how you tend to go about things, which is quite a nice touch for roleplay. Bit restrictive in the same way that moves are in Apocalypse World, but there's really nothing to stop you adding new styles if you think of new ways to go about doing things. So that's not a huge issue. Then you have focuses, which are more zoomed in and tight skills, more like specializations. So you could be good at fighting as a skill and have a focus in brawling, for example, and that would make you extra good in a hand-to-hand situation, which is quite nice. So you might boldly fight with a focus in brawling. So you add your bold plus fight together, roll 2d20, try and get under that. If that dice roll is a 1 or under your focus in brawling, that counts as a crit, which counts as 2 successes. So on a dice roll you're going to get anything from 0 to 4 successes. Difficulties rise as high as 5, but you can get extra dice and bonuses for various other things that you can do. You compare the difficulty and that determines whether you hit, whether you succeed or not. 20s add complications. So it's not a botch, but the games master can then bring in something that's a complication, like you punch the guy in the jaw, but his tooth is now embedded in your knuckle and it hurts like hell. Take a point of damage. Or you could throw in extra chaos. That's a nice mechanic that they've got, is that if you remember the Dishonored games, if you've played them, if you go about things in too bold and too open a way, rather than being stealthy and careful and taking your time, then chaos increases and you get a bad ending at the end of the game, and it has various other effects in the game, which they add here, because the games master can then spend chaos points to make things more difficult, or to introduce new elements to the scene, or to give NPCs bonus die, things like that. You also have talents, which are various tricks that break the rules, including outsider magic, things like that. You get momentum. If you succeed more than you need to on something, then you get momentum, which goes into a general pool for the whole group, and then they can draw from that momentum to try and do things that are more extraordinary. Of course, you can cheese that by doing something easy before you try something hard, but I think a sufficiently watchful GM will be able to get around that. That's pretty much it. So, what can I really sum it up as? There's plenty here. They use their in-house system with tweaks, but it actually works this time. I think it's suited to this more than it is to some other things. It's not indexed especially well. Trying to find out how many mana points you had. There was one sentence in one paragraph. So somewhat hidden away while I was reading. It took me ages to find it. The art, yeah, is good, but then it's concept art from the game, so, you know, the original art isn't so good, isn't quite up to snuff. Why should you buy this rather than just adapting your favourite game system and using a wiki for the information? That's what I'm stuck on. I can't come up with a definitive reason other than it's going to save you work, it's going to save you scrolling through a lot of stuff online, and books can't get deleted, at least not easily, you know. This book can't get yeeted invisibly off the internet in the same way that a wiki can. So, value for money, it's questionable, but it's a useful reference, and the rules actually work for this, so make of that what you will. Style, give it a 4, but that's almost entirely down to the fact that they use the concept art from the original games. Substance, 4, there's a lot in there, it's not as complete as the wiki, but then nothing would be. That would have given it a substance 5 if it was about twice as thick and full of more information and expanded on the world, but you know, you can understand why it isn't. So that's an overall score of 4 out of 5 or 8 out of 10. I'd say it's worth it. Yeah, particularly if you have issues with the 2d20 system and want to see some tweaks and changes that make it work a bit better for this type of game. And if you want some inspiration on how to best handle stealth mechanics and so on, which are one of those sticking points in RPGs, much like grappling. Zang. It's been called misogynistic, racist, a hate group, reactionary. It's been blamed for Trump, for keeping women out of games and technology. None of this is true. If you want the real story, then you need to buy Inside Gamergate.